Hello everyone and welcome back. I hope this doesn't fall. Well, hello everybody, welcome back to another radio show. It's the Gear Change Show here on a Sunday, filling in for Saturday because I didn't feel up to it on Saturday. Sorry, did not record. Sorry I didn't record Friday and Saturday, but I'm going to make it up to Friday and Monday, Sunday, Monday. So I'm going to talk about, oh, by the way, for those of you who are Irish or have Irish descent, or some you guys are into the IRA or anything like that, happy St. Patrick's Day to the Irish out there. I have my corned beef today because we had some in the fridge. So yeah, everybody, welcome, happy St. Patrick's Day. And since it's St. Patrick's Day and we're celebrating the Irish, thought I'd tell you guys a story. Would you guys love to know how the British got the famous British Racing green color? A lot of you guys are saying, well, it's because that's the color they picked, or maybe that was something that they used during the war. So let me explain. I'll tell you the real origin. So each company has a color that's synonymous for, in its race cars, or countries, or because what happened was there was so each one has each country has a color that they're known for during certain times. So I think the origins for British Racing Green date back to the early 1900s. Like 1915, 1920, this is way before the war, and this is way before Germany and the Nazis and all that other stuff. So each country, I guess what happened was there was each country has their own thing. So there was going to be a race in Ireland, and it was going to be one of those motor races, and it was just going to be a sprint Grand Prix style race. Each country was asked to get a different company. The Americans were, I think America came over. Actually, I don't think America. What did America choose? I think America might have chosen. Did they choose blue? I think they might have choose blue. Yeah. So the Americans chose blue, and I think the British were going to choose blue, but they didn't. The Italians came along. The French came along. I think they went with. I think the Americans were black. And then the French came along. They were light blue, and then the Germans came along. They were white, not silver, like you guys think, because I think white was the national colors of certain flags back then. And the Irish, I think. The Irish really didn't have any manufacturers. I think they went with orange or something. And the British, who used to rule Ireland for a while, and before Ireland decided to kick them out, decided to honor their guests, and a little bit of an olive-branch piece ring, and they decided to paint their cars dark green, because dark green is a Irish color because of the clover leaf. Is the 4-leaf clover. So even though the Italians would use quadrifoligro, which would be clover leaf which means 4-leaf clover into their high performance models and some names back when. And I think the Italians stuck with red and stuff like that. So they raced, and I think they decided from there on in to have green as their. This is actually one part of the Gear Change show. I'm going to do two parts. So they decided after running that they'd use green as their color. That's the reason why every famous kind of color. That's why every race car. Everyone, like from Aston Martins to Bentleys to, certainly Bentley in the certainly Bentley in the I think the race was in the early 1900s. So I think from then on, I think Bentley was just Bentley, Rolls Royce, and a lot of the other British manufacturers in the 20s, 30s, 40s on up would use British racing green, and they would have different hues of British green and stuff like that. And it's a very famous color to paint Jaguars, Land Rovers, Aston Martins, Mini Coopers, of course. Anything with the British symbol is in green. In fact, I think the Bentleys back in 2003 were actually or that mint pine tree green. So, and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's a little tidbit. But the real gear change, I thought I'd give you guys a nice little 5-minute interlude, talk to you guys about something else. So if we're going to talk about, and we're also going to talk about, I would have talked about the silver arrows. Oh yeah, by the way, the myth of the silver arrows, you know how they were silver? A lot of people, they were painted, I think they were painted white, or I think they were painted white or something, or red, or green or something like that. They were painted different colors, and their weight was, it was a myth. I think it was proven wrong later. But I think what happened was the cars were over were just above the 750, were below the, were a little overweight. The minimum and maximum was 750 kilograms. And I think what happened was Mercedes took a bunch of brushes, and Auto Union did the same, and they scrolled away and they bristled away all the paint until they were bare metal, and I think that just became the color for the silver arrows throughout the Second World War, pre-World War, and it was pretty much a color that's been that light battleship gray was their kind of their thing. Kind of funny that that light gray kind of became a color for the Aston Martin DB5 that James Bond would drive, which was kind of hilarious. But yeah, that's a little tidbit about racing colors and stuff like that. We just had the 12 Hours of Sebring. For those of you who don't know, the 12 Hours of Sebring is based in a sleepy little town by the name of Sebring, Florida. And Sebring, Florida was kind of a sleepy little town, and then literally over a couple of years, built up to the Second World War, when we were flying over to Germany, when we were trying to train pilots. Kind of needed an Air Force base. We kind of need something that was out of the way, and the airport runways were built, and bombers and plane pilots were trained to fly bombers and land there, and it was to keep planes and stuff like that, to do sorties over there, and to just be an Army or a Navy Air Force base, so that people could fly over to aircraft carriers and stuff like that, and they rejoined the fleet and stuff like that when they were going over to Europe and stuff like that. That served its purpose from the early 1941 all the way till 1945, and then in 1946. Then in 1946, the base basically became, I think the base was around was used a little bit during the Korean War, and I think got phased out. And then people were wondering what they were going to use, and they were trying to figure out what they were going to use it for. And some people looked at the long straights and the long runway, and somebody down in Florida said, let's just turn this into there's a lot of fast cars, and the war is coming home. The wars are done, and the war's done, and we want to. This is no longer in use. We have a lot of fast cars. We need a lot of fast cars over from Europe, and America's getting in on the act with their racing. We wanted to turn in the early 50s. We wanted to turn it into a racetrack, and they plotted it around. They ran the 72nd edition. I remember when I watched the 2005 edition. Um, in Yeah, I remember when I watched the 2005 edition, which was over 19 years. Well, actually, 2025 will be 20 years. So about 19 years ago, I watched my first Sebring. So it's funny. I watched the 63rd running. Actually, no, 20. No, I actually the 53rd. I watched the 53rd running. So actually, 2005. 53rd. Yep, I remember the 53rd. Yep. Yeah, so the 12 Hours of Sebring was first run in 1950. It was 12 hours. Ferrari has the most team wins, although the first manufacturer to have most wins was actually Porsche. What was funny was a lot of people don't know this, but the people really didn't have budgets after the war, and people were just starting to gain money back, and sports cars were becoming a thing, and people wanted to use everything of all ages. And this is actually the car that actually won the first race, the 12 hour. That's a Crossley hot shot, and that won the first race. And people were like, I think. And it started out as a 3.6 miles. So not. What was the first one? So it was originally a 3.5 mile track. Well, the original circuit was a 3.5 mile track, and then eventually it went out to a 5.192 mile track. Dan Gurney has the fastest lap for 2 minutes 54 seconds. It's 3 miles. I think the current lap record now is, I believe it's still Kamui Kobayashi in a TSL 50, but so the track. So that's what the car ran like, and you guys can see it was built on airport runways, and it was, as you guys can see, there's a huge backstretch. They actually don't show you what was going on. They had the warehouse straight, Webster turn, but yeah, there were two big long straights, and the cars were able to hit speeds. The unique challenge about Sebring is not the uh, is not the not the duration, but it's also the track. Sebring, since it's an old World War II bomber testing facility and training facility, the track had little ruts and scuffs and bumps and stuff like that from where the bombers used to touch down, and and it would and it would shake and it would shake the cars to bits. It would literally it would literally shake the cars. It would literally shake the cars to bits. It would rail pieces off and rail tires off, and um, physically it was very demanding. I mean, a lot of cars would not finish the race because the suspension would break, and it would just really be tough on that. Now, suspension back then was a little more forgiving, but still, the bumps would hit the suspension. The bumps would hit the suspension, and it would really hit the drivers really hard. The only solace that the drivers ever any the drivers ever had was, or any comfort that the drivers had, not that it was comfortable at all, was the wheels were big rimmed back then, so they could absorb a lot of the bumps, and they weren't compacted into one little yoke like they are today. Um, and watching some of the cars, some of the classic cars today go over the bumps of Sebring, you could definitely tell that that they didn't have an easy time because suspension was kind of rudimentary. The tires had no adhesion to them whatsoever. The suspensions did not bump around because they wanted to make sure the cars were going to go around fast, and it would shake parts apart. It would shake exhausts apart. Engines would fail, pistons would crack, exhaust would crack, suspensions would crack, headlights would rattle off the car. You guys are getting it right off the bat. It was a real car breaker. It's not meant to. It's meant to test the endurance of not only the driver taking all those bumps. I mean, you didn't have a seat with any padding in it anywhere. You were just in a racing bucket with maybe a cushion, with maybe a thin cushion. So you can only imagine for 12 hours the car hitting the ground and you getting slapped and all those vibrations going to your body. It didn't feel very good, did it? And if your hands weren't properly, if you didn't properly train your hands to run on a steering wheel, you could hurt your hands. The drivers would take their hands off and they'd have sores and holes in their hands and skin missing and stuff like that. You had to have a real decent set of gloves back then, and you used to jiggle every part of your body, and your body would hurt the day after. It wasn't like Le Mans where it was smooth and the cars went fast. It wasn't Daytona. Daytona was more of was just as physically demanding as Sebring, but it was more tightly packed together, and you had to pay attention. Sebring, you do have to pay attention, and the way the corners are now, as they were then, your race can be over in a heartbeat if you're not careful. I've seen some pretty nasty accidents and stuff like that. I've seen some cars turn up and turn over the barriers, disintegrate over time. They had some really nasty crashes when I was watching the race. And I've been watching the race for over 19 years. So, yeah, you can only imagine just what went on with each one of these races and what was going on and stuff like that. It was really, really crazy. And manufacturers used to race everything from Porsches, Jaguars, Aston Martins, Corvettes, when they came around in the late 50s. Ferraris and stuff like that, Maseratis, Lotuses, anything with a sporty credentials. I mean, that hotshot really doesn't really look sporty, but it does the trick. I mean, it has a small little, teeny little engine, and that's what all that was needed because apparently it had really good efficiency, and it was able to. It was just a nice little go-getter, and it was good enough to just take all the bumps. Apparently, it just didn't have it. That was 1950. You were bouncing around in a little runabout. You're not bouncing in a runabout now. That hotshot probably had anywhere from 50 to 75 horsepower. The new GTP cars have around 607, have around 650 to around 700, and they weigh about 21 to 2,200 pounds with the fuel in them, and they also have hybrid systems. And the cars also have a lot more downforce, so you have the car pinned to the track. Your hands are fighting the steering wheel, and you also have power assist. You also have to deal with all the bumps with a very stiff suspension. So you can only imagine with the stiff suspension, that does something to the electronics and your suspension and all this other stuff. The cars have gotten a little bit better, and they've figured out ways to alleviate some of the problems like that. But it's not easy. But the problem is with the smaller steering wheels, the hand sores are prominent. Dorsey Schrader once was running in an Audi R8 back in 2000, back in their 2001 or 2002, and he ran for with the small little yoke and all the sores. He actually got a hole in his hand because of how small the yoke and how much the drivers are bouncing around the cockpits and how they're fighting. It's like riding a mechanical bull, technically. Mechanical bull, and it's really nasty. So, if you guys want a demonstration of just how bumpy Sebring is when a car is really stiffly sprung, look up David Brabham going through Turner 1 in an Acura LMP2, and you'll see how hard his helmet and how hard his body is shaking and bobbing up and down and just bouncing because the track is just so bumpy. You can see his helmet doing this. And there's also the distance. You also have 12 hours, and your car has to last those 12 hours. Not only that, you also have to race and negotiate traffic during the day and at night. And because this is Florida, you can have rain during the day and at night. So you're doing about 180 to 170, 180 on the backstress on the top cars. And I think the slower cars are doing about 150, about 130, 140 probably. And 140, 150. And you can only imagine being in a GT car and getting bounced in a car that weighs. I remember when I first started watching Sebring, the GT cars weighed around 2,500 pounds. Now they weigh close to 28, 29, close to 3,000 pounds. With fuel in them, they weigh about 31, 32, 3,200 pounds. You can only imagine. It's not much heavier than a lightweight race car. And a road car, it's more relevant with these new GT3 LMs and stuff like that. These LM GT3s now, or GTD Pro and GTD as they call them in IMSA. You can see the GT cars are bouncing around a lot more. I mean, I saw Corvette drive their new C8 Z06 in one of the corners. You can see the car bobbing up and down because it's going over the bumps. You can only imagine that's transferring through this through that, and it's causing problems with the engine. The engine's already vibrating because it's a high revving V8 now. So you can only imagine that's not too good. And Sebring has never been too friendly with high revving engines and stuff like that. It just seems to like cars that are tough and good, cars that can go through it. I mean, both Corvettes finished, but and stuff like that. But it just seems that the track just beats up on people and stuff like that. My first Sebring I ever watched, though, as I said, was 2005. It was the 53rd edition, And I remember Audi was in its penultimate season in 2005. They win the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and then they'd come in with the diesel about a year later, but and win with that at Sebring. But I remember Audi going up against everybody, and then eventually Corvette going up against Aston Martin. Aston Martin winning on debut, of course, to the British manufacturer. Kudos to them. And it was definitely a spectacle. I liked the race, and I watched it ever since. I unfortunately didn't get to watch the 2006 edition because I lost Speed Channel that year, so I could only watch it on IMSA radio, and it was only like halfway through the year that I actually got it, so I could watch the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and I was, and I think I watched. What did I watch it? No, I actually did watch it. I think I was up in my room actually watching it because I couldn't watch. I remember watching the start of the 2006 Mobile One. Actually, no, did I? No, I did not. I didn't watch it. I didn't see it till like late March. I don't think I had coverage till like early April or May for races. I think one of the Daytona races or something like that I had it for, and then I had so I was able to. So, and then 2007, 2008, and on, I've been able to catch each single one. Well, actually, I've been able to catch some of them when the IMSA websites have been good, but I've been able to catch moments of it and be able to watch. I mean, I was able to watch the whole thing on YouTube. Yeah, the last 3 4 hours on YouTube. So, not on YouTube, but on Peacock. Um, but yeah, it's just amazing how a race, and this year's race was actually pretty good. Uh, the Lexus won. I think Mercedes won GTD. GTD Pro went to Lexus. LMP2 went to Orica. I'm not surprised there. And then GTP was actually won by Acura/Honda. Louis Delatraz actually got past Sebastian Bourdais in the Cadillac, who was actually in their final season, and that would have been great to have the 12 Hours of Sebring on top. But I think they want the 24 Hours of Le Mans as well. And but it was a great race. There was some great racing. It was nice to watch the last 2 hours and watch a sprint race at like 40 minutes to go. It was nice to watch a nice sprint race and stuff like that. So it was great to see that. So, but yeah, I'm gonna be this one to do. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I don't know who won the NASCAR race because I have no idea who won the NASCAR race. I'll probably put that down in the description on the NASCAR race, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm probably gonna shoot my vlog early in the day, probably during noontime, because I'm gonna go see a movie later, and then I gotta go to work on Tuesday, have fun again. So I'll see you guys later. Peace.